Let's get started with today's story. I still remember the day she brought it up. We were in the kitchen. Nicole, my wife of 9 years, was slicing up carrots for dinner while I was scrolling through my phone. "Jason," she said, her voice carrying that careful edge she used when she wanted to convince me of something. "The girls are talking about a cruise." I looked up. "A cruise?" "Yeah, just a short one. A week in the Caribbean. Mandy, Liz, and a few others. It sounds like fun, son. Beaches, cocktails, a break." I frowned. "You hate boats." She waved the knife dismissively. "That's only because we've never been on a nice one. These cruise ships are like floating hotels." Mandy showed me pictures, pools, casinos, spas. "It's not like we're talking about fishing boats here." I wasn't thrilled about the idea, to be honest, but Nicole had been stressed lately. Her marketing job had her working late hours, and she'd been snapping at me more than usual. Maybe this was what she needed, a breather. "Okay," I said finally, "if you think it'll help you relax." She beamed at me, her hazel eyes lighting up like Christmas. "You're the best." The week she was gone was uneventful. I worked, hit the gym, and tried not to think too much about the fact that she was lounging on some tropical beach while I dealt with our leaky faucet and the neighbor's dog digging up our yard. She called a few times, but the conversations were brief. "How's it going?" I asked during one of those calls. "Great. We just left St. Thomas. The water is so blue, Jason. You wouldn't believe it." "Glad you're having fun," I said. "Miss you." "Miss you too," she said, but there was something in her tone, a tightness I couldn't quite place. Before I could press her on it, she said, "Okay, I've got to go. The girls are waiting for me." "All right, have fun." When she came back, something was different. "Hey," I said when she walked through the door. I pulled her in for a hug, but she stiffened slightly before relaxing against me. Her suitcase was scuffed, and she smelled faintly of sunscreen and salt water. "Hey," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "How was it?" I asked, stepping back to look at her. "It was good, really relaxing." But her eyes didn't meet mine, and for the first time in years, I felt the itch of suspicion crawl up my spine. Over the next few days, Nicole was distant. She didn't laugh at my jokes like she used to. She spent more time on her phone, her face carefully blank whenever I walked into the room. At first, I tried to brush it off, but then something else started happening. Nicole, who used to go out with her friends maybe once or twice a week, began going out almost every night. "Mandy wants to grab drinks," she'd say casually, or "Liz is having a rough day, so we're going to talk." At first, I didn't think much of it. I wanted to be a supportive husband. But after the third or fourth night in a row, I started to feel uneasy. "Another night out?" I asked one evening as she slipped on her heels. "You've been seeing the girls a lot lately." She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's nothing. We're just catching up." "Catching up? What do you mean, catching up?" "You were together for an entire week," I said, my voice tightening. Nicole's head snapped toward me. "Why are you making it a big deal?" "Listen, I want to go out with my friends. You can't forbid me that." "It's not a big deal," I said slowly. "It's just different." Nicole didn't reply. She grabbed her purse, shot me an angry look, and stormed out without a word. Something felt off, but I pushed the thought aside. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But then came the night I saw the text. I wasn't snooping, I swear. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs. The screen lit up, and I saw the name Luke. The message read, "Thinking about you. Wish I was there." My stomach dropped. When Nicole came back downstairs, I was sitting at the table, her phone in front of me. "Who's Luke?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "What?" "Luke," I repeated, holding up her phone. "He wishes he was here." "Care to explain?" She swallowed hard, her face pale. He's just a guy I met on the cruise." "Just a guy," I said, standing up. "Nicole, what the hell is going on?" "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "He was part of the staff, a bartender. We talked a few times, That's all. I stared at her, my heart pounding. And he's texting you because... I don't know, she snapped. I didn't ask him to. I haven't even replied. That's not the point, Nicole. You're hiding something, I can feel it. She crossed her arms, her jaw set. You're overreacting, Jason. Am I? I shot back. Because right now, it feels like my wife is lying to me. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned away. I'm going to bed. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to make sense of everything. The words thinking about you, wish I was there echoed in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that Nicole was slipping away from me. Dark hair and not someone I recognized entered the house, my stomach twisted. It was the same guy Nick had described to me a few days earlier, the man who had been at the house while I was at work. He stepped inside, and Nicole greeted him with a hug. That hug quickly turned into a kiss. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. It was clear they'd done this before, the way they touched each other, the familiarity. It hit me like a ton of bricks. My heart slammed in my chest as I watched them move toward the bedroom. The camera in the hallway caught them walking together, and I could hear muffled voices, but it was clear what was happening. They were kissing, their hands all over each other. Then the bedroom door shut behind them, and I knew exactly what they were about to do. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stopped the footage and sat there frozen, trying to comprehend what I had just seen. The anger, the hurt, it all welled up inside me. Nicole had been lying to me for who knows how long. This man, this stranger, was now in my house, in our bed, and I had been completely oblivious. The weight of the betrayal crushed me, but I had to know more. I wanted to know who this guy was, so when she went to sleep, I grabbed her phone from the counter, my hands shaking. She always left it unlocked, so I went straight into her messages, hoping for more answers. It didn't take long to find them. I checked her most recent messages, and there was only one man's name besides mine. It was Luke, the bartender from the cruise, the guy who had been texting her a couple of days earlier, and she claimed she didn't know why. My mind raced as I read through their messages. It turned out that Luke had taken a leave from work to visit her here. He would be staying for 2 weeks, and Nicole was thrilled about it. And then, as I scrolled further, I found more, much more. The texts from their time on the cruise, the photos she had sent him, the flirtatious messages. She had been cheating on me while I was led to believe she was on a girl's getaway, and those nights she claimed she was going out with her friends, the ones from the past few days, those were the nights she was actually spending with Luke. I could barely hold on to my thoughts as I read through the conversation. I had all the proof now, every message, every photo, it was all there. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. The shock was still settling in, but one thing was clear. I wanted revenge. I had been betrayed, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I looked through the messages again. There was one that stood out. Luke had planned to come back in 2 days, meeting her at noon while I was at work. He would slip into my house just like before, and I wouldn't even be there to stop it. That was when the idea hit me. I called Nicole's parents the next morning. I told them I had a surprise planned for Nicole. I wanted to fly them in so they could visit and surprise her. They were thrilled at the idea of spending time with their daughter, but what they didn't know was that my real plan was for them to catch her red-handed. I wanted them to see her with Luke in the most humiliating way possible, right in my own home, in our bed. The day had finally arrived, and I told Nicole I would be coming home late from work. I had planned to take the day off so I could execute everything perfectly. After I left the house, I went straight to the airport where I waited for a few hours for her parents to arrive. When they landed, I quickly checked the cameras in the house. Sure enough, Luke was already there earlier than planned, slipping into the house like he owned the place. I picked up her parents and drove them back to the house. My heart raced. I knew this was the moment of truth. As we walked into the house, I could already hear faint sounds coming from the bedroom, soft voices, the rustling of bed sheets, and the unmistakable sound of moans. I told her parents to stay quiet, and we all crept down the hallway. I reached the bedroom door and pushed it open without hesitation, and there they were, Nicole and Luke, entwined in the bed, completely exposed. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Her parents stood motionless, stunned and unable to process the scene before them. I didn't wait a second longer. The rage took over and I shouted, "What the hell is going on here?" Nicole's eyes widened in horror, frozen in place as the shock washed over her. She scrambled to cover herself, but the damage was already done. Luke, equally stunned, hastily grabbed his clothes and bolted out of the house without saying a word. Her parents stood rooted to the spot, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. "How could you?" her father yelled, his voice cracking with hurt. "In your own house, with another man? What have you done?" Her mother, eyes brimming with tears, stared at her daughter in silence for a moment before she erupted. "You've destroyed everything we taught you, everything we believed in," she said, her voice sharp and trembling. "You've broken this family." Nicole couldn't respond. She just stood there, pale and frozen, as if unable to comprehend what was happening. Then the tears began to fall. She broke down crying uncontrollably, her sobs shaking her entire body as the weight of her actions crashed down on her. Each word she tried to form dissolved into broken gasps. "I'm sorry," she choked out between sobs, her voice trembling and desperate, but the words felt hollow, powerless against the destruction she had caused. I stood there, my anger surging. I had planned this moment for days, but seeing her face, seeing her parents' pain, it was still a gut punch. My heart ached, but the fury drowned everything else out. I didn't care anymore. Her mother's face turned ashen as she stepped closer, grabbing Nicole's arm firmly. "You've humiliated us," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and anguish. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Nicole tried to speak, her mouth trembling, but no sound came out. Her sobs grew louder, tears streaming down her face as she clutched at her sides, overwhelmed by shame and regret. But it wasn't enough. It was too late for apologies. I couldn't hold back any longer. My voice cracked with fury as I spat. "This is what you've been doing behind my back, lying to me, sleeping with this guy while I trusted you this whole time. I was the fool." Her father shook his head in disbelief, his voice heavy with grief. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said bitterly, turning away as tears welled in his eyes. "You're not the daughter we raised." Her mother stepped forward, her tone cold and resolute. "We don't want to see you again, Nicole, not after this," she said sharply. "You've broken everything. You're not the person we thought you were. We raised you to be better than this." Nicole's face crumpled as her mother's words hit her. She staggered back, her legs buckling beneath her. Her sobs became frantic. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The weight of the betrayal she had wrought on all of us was unbearable, even for her. I stood there, heart pounding, consumed by the anger and pain of her deceit. This was the final nail in the coffin. There was no going back now. Her parents turned away, their faces etched with disbelief and anger as they headed for the door. Her father didn't look back, his voice low and final as he spoke. "I can't believe what you've become, Nicole," he said. "Goodbye." Her mother followed, pausing briefly in the doorway. She looked back, her eyes filled with disappointment. "You've hurt us in ways we can't forgive. Don't try to reach out to us," she said softly but firmly before leaving the room. As her parents turned and walked away, I took a deep breath. My voice was cold and final. "It's over, Nicole. I'm filing for divorce," I said, staring at her tear-streaked face. "You've destroyed everything we had, and there's no coming back from this." Nicole sobbed uncontrollably, reaching for me. "Please, I'm sorry. I'll fix it, I promise." I shook my head, unmoved. "You should have thought of that before you lied, before you cheated." Without another word, I turned and left the room, her cries echoing behind me. I took her parents to a nearby hotel that night. The following day, they would fly back home. Our goodbyes were brief, and the few words we exchanged were polite but strained. I returned home after dropping her parents off, and then I told Nicole to leave. She didn't argue. She just packed a few things and left, heading to her friend Mandy's place. The next day, I filed for divorce. It was a straightforward process, but the weight of it still hit me hard. The papers were served, and Nicole didn't fight it. She knew it was over, just as I did. Our marriage had ended, and there was no going back. The betrayal was too much to forgive, and I couldn't live in a lie any longer. It was time to move on.